Shalom, my friends. This is chapter 7 of our series on Neshama and soul. In this chapter, we're going to be discussing reincarnation. In Hebrew, we call it Gilgal HaNeshamot. And this is a very strong teaching in Kabbalistic and in Hasidic writings, including in the book of Tanya, which discusses some of the reasons and some of the teachings of Gilgal HaNeshamot, the concept of reincarnation. I would like to point out, obviously, that the Torah concept of reincarnation, the Jewish concept, is vastly different from the one in the Eastern religions or in many of the others that exist in the world. One difference is that in the Torah concept, there is specific reasons why a person would have to come down again, and there is not an ongoing series. It has a definite end. One example of an end is that every neshama has to come here to collect the 613 mitzvot, which we call the garments of the soul, in order to come to the great light next to godliness and to complete its missions all together. That's one aspect. There are many others. Amongst the questions that we have about reincarnation, which I hope to address towards the end of today's lecture, is, as we believe in reincarnation, how can you be sure that when you go to the spiritual realm, you will meet your loved ones, they will be reunited? How do you know they're not reincarnated somewhere? And so we'll discuss that towards the end. To give you a few aspects of reincarnation, I'd like to introduce it by a classic story of the Baal Shem Tov, as I was requested to tell more stories in this series as well. The Baal Shem Tov lived from the year 1698, in Hebrew that is the year Nachas, to the year 1760. He was the founder of the Hasidic movement, and he was obviously the first Hasidic Rebbe. And amongst the concepts of a Rebbe is that when you go in front of a Rebbe, he doesn't just see your body, your outer shell. He sees straight into your neshama, into your soul. He could tell you how many times you've been in the world, how many times you'll have to be in the world, what your mission in life is, and he knew exactly how to connect you to your Creator, and as I say, what you have to achieve in this lifetime as well. The Baal Shem Tov had many, countless of Hasidim who used to visit them. Amongst them was a childless couple, and they wanted more than anything else in the world. They wanted a child. They felt that their life was incomplete without it. You know, we all have many wishes and prayers in life, and sometimes they change over years. What you wanted in your 20s and 30s isn't necessarily what you want in your 50s and 60s. But for this couple, whenever you would have approached them and say, if you can have one wish, what would it be? It would be one thing, that they should be blessed with a child. And that's what they used to do. Once a year they would visit the Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov, and in a private audience, they would say to the Rebbe, all we ask of you is bless us with a child. We're sure you can do it. And every year he would put his holy head into his hands, think for a while, and he'd get up and he'd say, I wish I could. But ever since creation, when it was decided that you two souls should be together as a couple, no children were granted. And so there's nothing I can do for you. And yet, this couple were persistent. They never gave up. Every year they kept asking the same request. one year, as they were going to the Baal Shem Tov, the wife turns to the husband and says, Hezekiah, I feel my biological clock ticking, and if we're not blessed with a child this year, it's not going to happen. So my idea is, this year, when we go to the Baal Shem Tov, let's make, so to say, a toy in his office. We'll say, Rebbe, we are not leaving your office unless you bless us with this child. Husband agrees. The Baal Shem Tov hears their request once again, hears their insistence, and know the heartbreak that it's coming from. So he puts his holy head into his hands, and after a few minutes, he lifts it up with a bright smile, and he says, I have wonderful news for you. Within a year, you are going to be blessed with a baby boy. I want you to bring him to me for the bris. The parents were in seventh heaven, and being great Hasidim, they were certain that their Rebbe's blessing will come to fruition. They had no doubts. To show their faith, even before they went home, they already, so to say, went to the baby shop and bought a crib and all the necessary. And true to the Baal Shem Tov's word, within a year they had the most amazing son. They brought him to the Baal Shem Tov for the bris. He made such a tumult about him. The Hasidim were astounded because the Baal Shem Tov seemed so taken up by this child. And, you know, to many parents, or to many strangers, I should say, babies look the same. To a guy, maybe a bit pruny, give me him when he's 2 years old. But to observant parents, they see their child's potential. They could see the seed in that child, know what he's going to grow up to be. And these parents saw the greatest gifts in their child. He was the most amazing human being ever. You know, in America, the wish used to be that my kid should grow up to be the next president of the United States. I'm not sure that that is still something that most of parents pray for, but to these parents of this little Yisrolik, their prayer is that their child will continue showing the potential that he does, and he'll, so to say, be the next Rebbe. At his first birthday, they brought him to the Baal Shem Tov again for a blessing, and the Baal Shem Tov again made such a tumult of him, and they saw what a spiritual child. Already at such a young age, he was able to pick up a siddur, and he showed such promise. Towards his second birthday, the mother is cleaning the house, the father's out to work. Es wird nicht gut. Suddenly she has an uneasy feeling. She runs to the crib, picks up her child. The child is gone. Nothing she could do but bring him back to life. He had simply passed away from the world. To say that this couple was heartbroken is an understatement. They sat at their shiva. There were no words to comfort them. And after their shiva, they traveled to the Baal Shem Tov with the tragic news. And they said to him, Rabbi, we hate to say bad things, but tell us, how could God Almighty do this to us? We don't know if we'll survive. Our lives were empty before we were blessed with this child, but at least we were able to live. How can we survive this tragedy, knowing that our only child has been taken from us? Why would God do such a terrible thing to us? What sins did we ever do, either in this lifetime or in a previous lifetime, to deserve such a thing? What sins did this innocent little Neshama do? And you know, God needs good partners in this world. Look at the potential that this soul has. What would it have hurt God to allow this one soul to carry on living to its natural lifespan and outliving us? What harm could it have done? Why wouldn't God allow that to happen? What sins? Why are we being punished in this way? And these were just a sample of the questions that this sorry couple were asking. The Baal Shem Tov was crying with them. And when they had finished with all their questions, the Baal Shem Tov said, would you mind, have a seat, and I'd like to tell you a story. And this is the story that the Baal Shem Tov told. He said, many years ago, in a distant country, a king and queen lived. And they had everything in life. That is, everything that money can buy. But there are certain things that even money can't get you. And that is children. They wanted a child more than anything else. And that was the one thing that they didn't have. They went to every doctor, every healer that could help them. And they tried everything. So garnish geholfen, nothing helped. One day, an advisor came to them and said, you know, king, there's one people in your world, in your country, who are the most powerful, strongest nation. They are the Jewish people. If you get them to pray to their God with all their heart, it'll do the trick. There's nothing that they can't achieve. So the king says, wonderful. Call me these Jews. I'll give them gold, diamonds, whatever they want, and let them pray to God to give me a child. So the advisor says, well, this nation is a bit of a weird one. If you give them everything they want, and as a result, they pray to God, it'll never be completely sincere. With them, sadly, the only thing that works is tzars. Give them troubles, and then it brings out its sincerity. So my advice to you is, put out a decree that if you don't have a son within a year, all the Jews in your country will be banished from your land with only that which they can carry on their back, and that should do it. The king was so desperate for a child, he didn't listen to any rationale. He just put out the decree. And believe me, my friends, in Jewish history, we have been banished from countries for even less. But what are the Jewish children? Why are they responsible that this guy has no son? They are filling up the shuls. In those days you could. There was no virus around. They're filling up their shuls, and the prayers are going to high heaven. Praying to God. Give this king and queen a prince and get him off our backs. Lazun suru. The prayers are going up there. The heavenly court gathers and says, we would love to fulfill their request. The only problem is there's no soul that has ever been decreed to this king and queen. And there are no new souls created. They're all there since the 6 days of creation. And if we don't have a soul, what are we going to do to them? Now, my friends, let me tell you something. The soul in the spiritual realms is in the greatest bliss possible, close to God. The last thing it wants to do is come down to earth. But as the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, Baal korchach ato noilad, Baal korchach ato chai. It is against our will that we are born, and it's against our will that we live. And therefore they force the soul to come down to gain all the garments, as mentioned in the beginning of this year. Now, imagine there was one soul there. It had come down all the times it had to. It had completed everything. It was in bliss in Gan Eden in paradise. It had no problems in the world, but it too heard all the cries of the community. And being a selfless soul, he came to the heavenly court and God Almighty, and he said, listen, do me a favor. I'm volunteering. I know how difficult it is to come to earth, but I can't bear to see the tragedy that this community may be in. If you allow me, I volunteer to go down to the physical realm and be the prince of this king and queen. They checked its records, and they decided, if you're volunteering to help the entire community, against the game. And suddenly, the queen fell pregnant. Simcha. Everybody is rejoicing. The decree is over, and so good, and a beautiful baby boy is born to that king and queen. This prince wasn't like other princes. You know, other princes are into all kinds of things. The guy in England was into bowls and things like this. But this prince was unique. He loved studying. He loved gaining knowledge. And from a little baby on, he showed an interest, a curiosity in everything. And he was a very bright boy. And they hired tutors, but soon he surpassed all his tutors that they hired for him. The king looked through the land, and finally he discovered there was a certain bishop who was reputed to be knowledgeable in every field. And he came to this bishop and he said, I want to hire you to be the tutor to my son, the prince. The bishop reflected for a moment and he said, I am ready to do that on one condition. And that is, you give me a private room within the palace that only I am allowed to enter for an hour a day. No one else is allowed to enter under punishment of death, not even the royal family. And if you give me that room for an hour a day, privacy, I'm ready to do it. So they agreed, and he was hired to teach the prince. The prince grew very attached to his tutor because he truly knew every facet of knowledge, every science, everything. And the prince was so taken by him. He had so many questions. He loved this bishop, and he was advancing and advancing in his studies. As a few years passed by, the prince had obviously noticed that this bishop went into a private room every day for an hour. He was curious as to why he did it, but he was informed too that he's not allowed to enter the room. But after a few years of this, his curiosity grew the better of him. He didn't care about the consequences. All he wanted was to know what this prince does every day for an hour. But during the hour, the room is locked. What's going to happen? But before that hour starts, the room is open. So he decided he'll sneak into the room before the hour, he'll hide behind the curtain, and then he'll come out and see what it's all about. And that's what he did. And when he came out, he didn't understand what he was seeing, but there was the bishop dressed in tallis and tefillin, learning from a Gemara. The prince said, "What's this? What are you doing?" The bishop looked up, turned right, and said, "Please, do us all a favor. Just leave and don't tell a soul what you've seen." The prince says, "No, I'm not leaving until you tell me what this is all about." Having no choice, he said, "Listen, I want to tell you, I was born a Jew. In my youth, there was a pogrom. They killed my family. They killed most of my people, and me they took and put into a monastery. I had no choice. but publicly to grow in their ranks. But secretly, I always retained my Judaism. And so, this is what it's all about. Now, please leave. You will all in danger. The prince said, no, not until you teach me what this is, because this is one knowledge I've never seen. Having no choice, the bishop, the tutor, secretly began teaching him the Aleph Beis Chumash Gemara. And you know, until that moment, the prince never ever felt complete inner peace. And for the first time in his life, he did. He took to the Torah studies like nothing before. And after a while, the inevitable came. He came to the bishop and he said, I want to become like you. I want to convert to Judaism. The bishop said, I'm sorry. That is an impossibility. If you try and do that, they'll kill me and you and any Jews in this country. And that's what actually happened in Poland in the 1600s. There was a Polish prince who converted to Judaism. His name was Avraham ben Avraham. And somehow the Polish government, the Christian government, found out who he was. His own mother gave him up, and they gave him a choice to come back to Christianity, which he refused, and they burnt him at the stake because he refused to give up his Judaism. They burnt him as a hidden tzaddik, and it's a very famous story. So the bishop said, that's impossible. They'll kill us both. But a little while went further, and the prince insisted. He's ready to give up everything just to become a Jew. The bishop told him, you have a kingdom to run. He said, I don't care. I'm ready to give it all up. To make it a bit shorter, the bishop discovered that Amsterdam was a free country in those days. You could do whatever you want. So he said, if you're ready and you insist, if you're ready to give up everything here, then I could give you a letter to a certain rabbi in Amsterdam, make your way there. And as I said, to make it short, that's what happened. The prince took whatever he could, he disappeared, and he went to Amsterdam. He had enough money to live out his life. He converted to Judaism. He got married, had children, and lived the life of a tzaddik, of a true pious Jew, doing everything according to the Torah. And finally, his life came to an end. And his soul came up to heaven. They were judging what they should do to him. They said, what an unbelievable Neshama. First of all, he didn't have to come down. He volunteered. Look at his exemplary life that he lived, especially after converting. He never did anything wrong, just lived ala Teda v'ala Veda. He doesn't just deserve heaven. He deserves the highest levels, straight close to the Almighty. The Satan, the prosecuting angels came down, looked at his records and said, you have us. This is one person who we have nothing bad to say about. There's only one thing. You want to put him into heaven? Gesundheit. But the level you're talking about is a level similar to Moshe Rabbeinu. Do you remember, my friends, in the Chumash we read that when Moshe Rabbeinu was hidden in the basket in the Nile, and the daughter of Paro found him, and he was starving hungry. He hadn't eaten in a long time. And yet whenever she called the Egyptian maidservants, he refused to nurse. Until Miriam suggested they call his mother Yocheved, and only then did he eat. And you know why? Because a soul that would be speaking to God and giving the Torah had to remain pure only kosher food could enter his lips. And so he couldn't nurse from a non-Jewish lady. That's what they said about, the prosecutor said about this prince. You want to put him into heaven? Gesundheit. But the high level you're talking about, he has this terrible defect that he nursed from a non-Jew. And so he can't go there. The heavenly court said, you have a point. But what are our options? What should we do? To put him into a lower level of heaven, we can't, because he deserves higher. To put him into that higher level, we can't either, because he has the defect of the non-kosher food that entered his body. My friends, if only we appreciated what damage we're doing every time we put something non-kosher into our mouths, we would double think, we would reflect. So they were in a quandary. What do they do? And they came to the following conclusion. The best thing to do is send that neshama back to earth. Let it nurse from a Jewish mother for 2 years, and then it can come back to heaven and find its peace. And so the Baal Shem Tov says that I was consulted as to a worthy family that could look after that neshama and nurse it for 2 years and make sure it finds its peace. Whenever you came to me to ask for blessing for a child, the only soul I could think of was that one. But I never wanted to give him to you because I knew the pain you would suffer with when you lost that child. And so I constantly refused. But when you were persistent, and you came that year to me and said, we are not leaving this room unless you bless us with a child, I understood it's Bashet, that you were worthy of having that child. So I want you to know, says the Baal Shem Tov, that your little Yisrolik that you had for the almost 2 years is that soul. It isn't because of your sins that it was taken, or because of his sins. The reason God couldn't allow it to live constantly is for the neshama's good. You know, the greatest soul in the world, once it reaches bar mitzvah, has free choice. It could get up to anything, who knows? And if it gets into a bad group, who knows what can happen to it? And if it stains itself with sins and transgressions, then it might need to go through the whole revolutions again, all the cleansing and Gehenna. That's not fair to the soul. To put it through all that after that completed, the only choice we had was to put it down for 2 years, to reach its completion. And so the Baal Shem Tov turns to the couple and says, that was your Yisroel. And I pray that you will find your inner peace. You'll find your strength one day in the knowledge that you helped that soul reach its completion. So my friends, not everything in life is black and white. We don't understand the journey of the soul, but that is one story of reincarnation, that the soul had something to rectify in this world. In that case, it only took it 2 years to be able to rectify. Sometimes you hear of women who have miscarriages. We don't understand what it is, but one point is exactly that. That soul had to come through and have the pregnancy that it did, so it reaches completion. Some people live a bit longer. Each one, there's no accidents. It is here for reincarnation to do what it has to in life. I'll have to continue to answer other questions about reincarnation in the next one. For now, God bless you.